Well, welcome back to The Mouse and Men, where we explore the grown-up side of Disney. In light of not being able to travel like we wanted to, we have been taking a virtual tour around the World Showcase Lagoon, visiting each country's pavilion at the World Showcase. We've gone almost halfway around World Showcase Lagoon, and this week we find ourselves in Japan.
We sure do. Chris, I'm so excited to get to relive this trip that we took about a year ago.
Yeah.
Just week by week. Japan, a really cool pavilion. I mean, as we go around, maybe it was the alcohol talking, but I just loved each pavilion a little bit more than the last one. Be sure to follow along with us on social media too. The Mouse and Men on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can also go to themouseandmen.com. There's an option to sign up to be one of the first to receive our top 10 things for grown-ups to do in Walt Disney World. A little PDF that we're putting the final touches on before we release it to the public. But go sign up to be one of the first ones to get that at themouseandmen.com. But let's dive into Japan because we taste some things. We see some things that are really awesome. Why wait around any longer? Let's go exploring.
Let's do it. Dive in, baby.
So, I mean, just walking up, it's a pretty awesome landscape, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, like topiaries, landscaping is very big into the Chinese culture. Like bonsai trees, I guess, are have a Japanese art, and you see that kind of stuff all over the place. Just walking up with I think it's the 7-tiered temple.
Yeah.
Right there.
5 or 7 tier, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, because Japan has all of the pavilions are so well appointed, but you can hear the drums from a distance from the Japan Pavilion. So it's almost like it's calling to you. Even from some of the other pavilions, you can kind of hear it. And so as you walk up, I feel like that Japan, maybe more than any other of the pavilions for me, I felt the most immersed in the culture and feeling like that I was actually in Japan. Whether it was the drums, the koi pond, it looked like that I was at a marketplace somewhere in Japan. So I felt very immersed in that area.
Well, we walked up. I mean, first thing we did was grab a couple drinks because we are on this trip drinking our way around the world. We're getting a few things to eat too. But we got 2 drinks, and I've got to look up these names because I can't remember real well what they were called, but it was
the violet sake.
Yeah. Which I think you described as almost like a fruit punch.
It was almost like a light Kool-Aid with alcohol in it.
It was made with some purple pear. It was purple. It was very nice. And then frozen beer, which one thing I liked, I'm not normally a more hoppy, bitter beer lover, but because it wasn't a lager like the others, it was something a little different. I loved it. And they were out of what they normally use, Kirin.
Kirin. So I think they used Sapporo instead.
Yeah, and you were off ordering all that while I was videoing stuff. But I mean, the head is frozen, and then it's just barely not frozen. The rest of it, it was awesome.
It was such a fun treat. Again, we visited there in August of 2019, and so it was probably close to 100 degrees in the middle of the day when we visited Japan. And so to get a frozen treat like that was perfect to kind of cool you down and also add a little more alcohol into the mix. I loved how when you and I went to each one of the pavilions, we would both get separate drinks, but then try them to make sure that we got a more well-rounded experience. And so the fact that we got I guess would be considered a liquor in the violet sake, was nice. And then the frozen beer was, I'd never had frozen beer or even heard of it until we
Right.
were at that pavilion.
Well, I wouldn't. I mean, it was probably nitrogen cooled or something that I couldn't recreate at home.
Sure.
But I'd love to make that with other beers and just start experimenting with that. But like you said just a minute ago, I mean, really immersed with the drums as you're walking up. We got our drinks and then headed inside, because if you walk to the back of the pavilion, you can kind of walk into an art gallery. And
Yes.
what was really interesting, and you'll have to help me with the name, but in English it means cuteness, right?
Hmm. Yeah. I think it was pronounced, it looks like Hawaii, but it with a K. So I think
Yeah.
it's pronounced Kauai or Kauai.
Well, so we walk in there, and Japanese animation has a very distinct look to it, and I loved getting to see that. I've never, I mean, I guess I watched um, like some Dragon Ball Z, maybe some Pokemon. My brother was kind of into that stuff. He was a little bit younger growing up, but I got to see it, and it's a very distinct art style, but it's really on display, and just talking about the cuteness that they work into it, which now looking back all makes sense. It is
Yeah.
kind of a cute animation style, but to see it on display with all the bright colors and why, just some of why they work that in. And then right across the way is a huge department store where you can buy more traditional Japanese trinkets, clothing, all sorts of stuff. I agree.
That for
It was
me was,
immersive.
yeah, exactly. That's why when I felt like for Japan more than almost any of the other pavilions, because I went inside, all of the signage was in Japanese, all of the things that were being sold were in Japanese, all of the people working there. Again, everybody that works in these pavilions are from the countries that they are representing, which is always nice. But there was just something about it that I felt like I was in a department store in Tokyo.
Yeah.
And so something like, so it was so immersive with the cute or lovable art installation that we were checking out. I think that if I'm remembering correctly, we got so absorbed in looking at everything and trying to find things to buy for our families that we looked down and like, oh, if we don't go now, if we don't, we're going to run out of time to see all the other pavilions before we run out of the day.
We're going to be shotgunning too many drinks by the end. It's just not going to be pretty. Yeah. We took some time. I remember, because we try to record these episodes in the park. Last week's Morocco episode was actually good enough to use, but a lot of places like Japan, the drums are so loud.
Yeah.
Here we are re-recording it, or wind picked up. But I'm actually glad we get to re-record these and relive our trip around the world. But we went up to an outdoor dining area and just surrounded by this beautiful Japanese landscape. Kind of,
it was so peaceful.
Looking out over the water. You can see some of this on our YouTube channel, because we show our live review of the drinks, as well as just show some scenery shots from each pavilion over on our YouTube channel. But I mean, could have sat there all day just listening to those Japanese drums, sipping on something. We didn't get to try the green tea cheesecake, which sounded really good as well, or take time to experience any of the Japanese dining, which is, I mean, if you like Japanese steakhouses, go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be better than what you get, wherever in the U.S., just because they're using, I mean, they're doing everything they can to stay authentic.
And I think that's one of the things that, looking back and kind of using this to to re-record to talk about the trip that we went on a year ago. That some of these locations right now, because of the COVID epidemic, are temporarily closed.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to relive some of those, because now I miss the fact that we were running out of time, so we didn't go get the green tea cheesecake. But if I would have known then what I know now, I would have absorbed it, taken it in a little bit more, because who knew that this was going to happen. And so to not be able to even stay longer
Right.
is, and you mentioned this a couple of weeks ago on the show, that EPCOT to a lot of people seems like a one-day park. But if you're going to take your time and really absorb and take in the culture, especially around the World Showcase, it really can take you 2 days to get through that if you want to stop and smell the roses, so to speak.
Yeah. And, even longer than just 2 days, because we had to rush just to get around half the park of World Showcase, because there's a whole other half to the park that we didn't even touch, really.
Yeah.
Because we got there shortly after it opened, rode one ride, went around the world, and then rode one ride on our way out. And there wasn't time for anything else. So, can I just take a week and spend it just in EPCOT? If only the bank account would allow that. That would be fantastic. But in something that you mentioned even before we got going was that the cast members seemed nicer here than any other pavilion before. Not discounting anything that those other pavilions had going on, but just another level of niceness, of customer service.
Yeah, that customer service, the accommodations. So if you walk into the Japan Pavilion, to the left is a little hut area called the Garden House, where we got our beverages. And because we had never really explored that before, we asked some questions. What should we do? What should we buy? What kind of beer should we get to be frozen? And just the care and the excitement on their faces when they realized that I'm asking questions and I want to know more. They lit up with helping me. And so, yeah, again, that customer service level was just out of the park at the Garden House there in the Japan Pavilion.
Yeah, well, and I say that because I want to get into our plussing portion of the show. Plussing. Something that just kind of goes along with that customer service is I read a book by teacher and former VP at Walt Disney World, Lee Cockrell. He really helped. He helped open Disneyland Paris as, I believe, their head of food and beverage. Then also helped start the Disney Institute with some of the things that he had done, and just his knowledge from working in both Hilton and Marriott for decades before going to Disney. But he's got a book called The Customer Rules, and it's 39 rules that are very easy to implement to better customer service. And I read this just as a kind of a business professional development thing, but it's fantastic just thinking through 39 really easy things to add, or things that you're probably already doing, but it explains the why behind it. And the Japan Pavilion really got that when we were there, making sure they took care of us, understanding or making sure they understood our questions so they could actually give us the answers that we wanted, not answering what they thought they heard. Just something, if you want to add a little professional development to whatever you're doing, you don't have to work in customer service to get something out of that. But The Customer Rules by Lee Cockrell is my plussing contribution this week.
That's such a perfect contribution. And it felt like that everybody that we came into contact with that worked at the pavilion had read that book.
Yeah.
because they all went above and beyond. And so this is one of the reasons that you and I have talked for years about starting this podcast, about talking about Disney World, all of the different elements from a more grown-up perspective, because it can be so much more than just what some people think Disney is, with just Mickey Mouse or princesses at the Magic Kingdom. It is so much more. It is business development. It is getting yourself wrapped up in a culture at the Japan Pavilion. So I love that we do this podcast and talk about these things that maybe don't always come up when you just say Disney to maybe the fair weather fan, or
Right.
I've been there one time on vacation or something like that. So that's a perfect blessing for this week.
Well, Lee Cockrell's got other books that I may bring up in the future. I've loved all of them, reread some of them, but just if you're looking for, because Disney is a company that's recognized worldwide for customer service, that if you're looking to add some of that, look to these books. Disney Institute has a couple books as well, but Customer Rules is a great place to get started. Chris, I want to go back to Japan though.
Yeah, me too.
Also like to visit Japan, but
it's weird to think that I feel like we just started this series on going around the world showcase. And next week, I guess, hits the middle point of that with the American Pavilion. But it's weird that we're already at the halfway point almost.
right. Oh, well, and things are changing, so we got to get back. We got to figure out some way to get back masked up. Normally I have some sort of background. I was going to have the Japan Pavilion behind me. If you're watching this on YouTube, I don't have that background this week because I'm actually on vacation in Florida, not at Disney World, unfortunately. But with some different equipment, trying to ride out Tropical Storm Sally, which may be becoming a hurricane about the time that this airs. But luckily, right now we're out of harm's way. It's just going to be rainy and windy. But a little disappointed that I couldn't bring an awesome background this week to our video pod. But
your backgrounds are becoming legendary, my friend.
Well, I'm trying, just trying to add just a little bit of magic, just like Disney.
Well said.
But Chris, thanks for joining me on this trip around the world. Next week, the American Pavilion probably doesn't need a whole lot of explanation for most of our audience in the U.S. But until then, I just want to say, one, follow us on social media at The Mouse and Men on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Find us on YouTube if you're just listening to the podcast, where we've got video episodes. Plus, we've got video of us in the parks, live reviewing these drinks, walking around, showing you what these pavilions look like. So all I can say is don't grow up too much and keep exploring.
Love it. See you next week, buddy.
See you.